everyone. I am super excited to have Vika here today. Both of us have been diagnosed with Hashimoto's in our life, and both of us have very interesting stories. Hold on, she just joined now. We both received different care. We both received different care in different countries. So it's really, really exciting that I get to have another Hashimoto's cope in the room when she got diagnosed versus what happened in the room when I got diagnosed, and then what we would do differently or what we would have wished someone would have told us we need to do moving forward. So I'm going to let her in. These things always go so slow. Bear with me, guys. It's always the part where I have to be patient and wait for the instructions. I'm going to re-add you.
Okay, there.
Hey. These things always you gotta give it like a 3-minute buffer. I swear they never go right away.
Yeah, that's funny.
Oh gosh. Okay, well we got it. Awesome. Well, I'm super super excited to have you.
Me too. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Vika Rakowski. I am a holistic or integrative health practitioner, and I work with gut health, hormones, autoimmunity, or any of those chronic health conditions and mystery symptoms that somehow doctors are not catching. That's kind of where I started, or what it felt like. So I love working with those people.
Yeah, 100% agree. And those of you who are joining from Vika's community and don't know me, my name is Jasmine. I'm the founder of Jasmine Parker Coaching, and I primarily focus on working with women with thyroid conditions. Vika, will you share with us kind of how you got diagnosed with Hashimoto's and what that looked like for you?
Absolutely. I'm going to write some notes, or I might read off my notes just because
Fine.
but so I started having problems like in my teens. It definitely started with gut health, but I didn't really know what it was. I went to OBGYNs. My mom was having some fibroids, so I was like, maybe that's what I'm having. I was having a lot of pains. Really didn't know what was going on. They didn't find anything, so they kind of wrote me off. Come college years, I went to a bunch of doctors. Initially GI, also didn't give me anything, didn't tell me anything, so I started kind of learning on my own what to do about that. Then at 19, I went to Belarus to visit family there for 2 weeks because that's where I'm from. And I, as sad as it was, I was like crying myself to sleep. My stomach hurt really bad. I didn't know what was going on. And my grandma was like, ooh, what if you have appendicitis? Let's go to the ER. So we go to the ER for appendicitis. I didn't have appendicitis, but they kept me there for 3 days and they did very thorough checkups. They noticed my pulse was extremely low. So they did an EKG, noticed I had PVCs. They had me do a Holter monitor for, I think, a week or something. So I skip beats very often. And I had kind of a similar experience later on in the US, which I'll go over later on, but US didn't further. There they were like, okay, so what could be causing these PVCs, these heart situations? So they were like, maybe it's your thyroid. They did a heart ultrasound, a thyroid ultrasound. They saw some heart abnormalities. Then they saw thyroid nodules, and they saw that I had hypothyroidism. So they're like, all right, we have something to work with. I had also been like, I think I might have food allergies because I was going through like an elimination diet on my own at the time, this book. And I kind of had a feeling I might have some food allergies. So they also did a blood test for me on, I think like maybe like 15 to 20 foods. It wasn't a lot of foods, but they
Yeah.
did. I had goat and cow milk allergies. They didn't test for wheat or gluten at the time. I kind of figured that out a little bit later. But then they sent me home with recommendations to eat sea vegetables, to get more iodine in, to go to the sea more often, where or ocean. There's not an ocean nearby. There's a sea. So go to like water to get more minerals through your air. They told me to not do super intense like cardio workouts. There they called it aerobics. Here we would probably call it HIIT. And to focus on more like calming workouts, movements like that. They also sent me home with like selenium, magnesium, manganese, and a bunch of other vitamins. So I go back from Belarus with all of that information. I'm like, okay, yay, I have something to work off of. And go back to my doctor here, and completely they ignored any of my gut issues. I don't know why. They just kept ignoring the gut thing going on. And they did notice I had a low pulse. So they kind of did the same thing. Had me go to a cardiologist, noticed I had PVCs, had me do a Holter. And then instead of linking it to any other organ in my body, they were like, okay, let's put you on metoprolol, which is a beta blocker that lowers your heart rate. Made no sense to me because my heart rate was already low, my pulse was already low, and
Yeah.
and my blood pressure was already low. Everything was low. So when I went on it, I was like, whew, I didn't feel my heart before, but now I feel something's wrong. Like, this does not feel good. So the other alternative they gave me was ablation surgery. And my parents were like, what's the rate of that? Like, how is that going to help? They said, well, it's 60% effective. They're like, that's basically 50%. No, thanks. So that was the beginning. And I only got diagnosed with Hashimoto's 7 years later. So, and when I got diagnosed, I had just gotten married, and my husband had a holistic doctor growing up because he had his own health stuff. And I've been in the holistic world for a long time, but never knew how to find like a holistic doctor, a holistic practitioner. It was still pretty new to me at the time. And I didn't see it like on social media. So I found a holistic doctor. She diagnosed me with Hashimoto's. She also diagnosed me with candida overgrowth, which made a lot of sense with a lot of my symptoms at the time. I had already, by that point, most of my symptoms are actually a lot better. My Hashimoto's were not, but my gut health symptoms were better. But I still had a lot of stuff going on, obviously. Otherwise, she wouldn't diagnose me. But she did not know how to like get to the root of problems. She basically said this, you would have this for life. We can do LDN, we can do desiccated thyroid instead of levothyroxine, but she basically still followed like a medical model, but in like a holistic
Right.
practice. So it still started my journey, but until I started learning about like root causes and everything else, then that's when it really took me to like the next step. But
Yeah.
definitely long,
Yeah.
crazy. And I feel like maybe if I didn't get that support that I did in Belarus, like seeing that there's another way to look at the body, to look at health, to look at how to serve yourself, maybe I wouldn't have known that there were other options besides just doing, just listening to like, oh, it's a cardiovascular issue, which obviously it was not a cardiovascular issue at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. 100%. Wow. Thank you for sharing your story. I know sometimes those can be like really traumatic, especially when like it takes years to like solve the issue, and you go through this hope roller coaster, right? And then that gets to be a little bit draining too. So I always like to thank people for sharing their story because they're so powerful, but they're also so personal, and they bring up, those unwanted feelings as well. So thank you for sharing. And to kind of give you guys a perspective, I wanted to share my story with you because, like Vika said, when she first even got diagnosed with a thyroid problem, it was overseas in a different country. And part of her, treatment was go to the sea. When's the last time a doctor told you to go to the sea? Seriously. And then when she came to the US, she kind of was shut down, didn't have a lot of support. They were going down a completely different road. They treated her heart rate. That's what they focused on. And then they went down that heart path to ablation, to medication, and completely ignored everything else. And that's kind of, what my story is with Hashimoto's is I would have all of these symptoms and I would feel like crap. And all my lab tests would come back normal. And they'd be like, well, everything's normal according to this lab test, so there's nothing wrong with you. And then you start to believe that here in the US, that nothing is wrong with you. Doctors know best. That's what we're taught. That's what we lean on. And unfortunately, fortunately for me, I ended up ordering some at-home tests. I was doing fertility testing at the time, and with fertility testing comes a TSH in there, which is a standard lab that, all the doctors run when it comes to thyroid health. And that was super elevated at 25. And so I had brought my at-home test to my doctor and said, hey, this is very high. I think there's an issue here. Maybe it could be the answer to all the symptoms that I've been experiencing, that we've been, going and seeing other specialists for because we don't have an answer. Maybe this is it. And it was incredibly surprising to me that even with hard evidence, like this is my lab work, it's abnormal, please do something about it, I still got met with resistance on that of, well, your last one was normal, so why should we run another one? Even though this new one said it wasn't anymore. I really had to fight tooth and nail, and this is a medical professional having to still fight tooth and nail with another medical professional about rerunning a test because something has changed and things can change, right? And so it wasn't until I pushed and pushed and she reran it and she saw that all the numbers came back high, including my antibodies. And then it was just a matter of a message over my chart of, hey, yeah, these are abnormal, so the next step will be medication. Like, we didn't talk about what the diagnosis meant. We didn't talk about what this medication is, what it's supposed to do for me, how long I'm supposed to take it for. We didn't get any diagnosis to go to the C. We didn't get any, treatment to take certain supplements. Like, I had no idea what this meant for me and moving forward. And so I find it like super interesting, which is why I wanted you to share your story with, everyone as well, because we both had thyroid diagnoses, but also in different countries, and the care is completely different. Yeah. But then also to have Vika come back to the US with the diagnosis and still have to fight for that diagnosis, it just doesn't seem correct. And so that's where really my passion lies around you being your biggest advocate for your health. You live with your symptoms every day. Even though a test says something is normal, doesn't mean that you feel normal. Just because it says normal doesn't mean everything's okay. And I had to really push. And like Vika said, we kind of had to figure this out on our own, and we had to learn it on our own and what our other options were, because no one was giving us any other options or a direction to go. We had no idea. And so that's kind of why we wanted to meet together, so that we can tell you some things that we wish somebody would have told us after we got our diagnosis. What do you think about that, Vika?
Yeah, I definitely think you're right on target. I think there's like a lot of, almost like you get PTSD after this kind of experience, because you're constantly filled with doubt, with gaslighting, and you're trying to figure out something's not right, something's not, I can tell my body's not functioning like it used to, or that's why in my practice, and I'm sure you're the same, I don't believe in hypochondriacs. I just believe we haven't figured out what's going on yet. Because I do think a lot of people experience exactly what you and I have, and it's very hard, and it's very sad. And I see at this point, when I hear new people struggling with very similar symptoms that I did, it's almost to me predictable the road they're going to go on. They're going to see this professional, they're going to see that professional, they're going to offer them drugs or surgery, they're going to have new problems that arise from that drugs and surgery, and they're at the end of the day still not going to feel helped. Yeah. And I'm sure that's a big part of the reason that why you went into this as a healer now, as a practitioner, as a consultant, because you want to help people avoid all of those issues, because it's so predictable now for us, because we see it, we lived it, and we see everyone else go through the same motions to realize that they're not getting the support that they need.
100%. And think about all of the unnecessary things that can happen to you when you don't know what to do. for Vika and I, we both got put on beta blockers for our heart rate and, did monitoring. And for Vika, went a step further where they wanted to do ablation for her. Like, heart rate is something that, correlates, is one of the many vast symptoms that correlates, with thyroid disorders, whether hyper or hypo. And it's just crazy sometimes, like the amount of years it takes to even get that diagnosis, because the symptoms are kind of related to a lot of things. But the problem that we want to point out is when you think about traditional medicine, it's really focusing on a symptom and taking care of that symptom. So when it came to our heart rates, all they wanted to do was send us to cardiologists, do monitoring, do pills, do tests, and that's all they cared about was the heart rate. And yes, your heart is a very important organ, but you also have to understand, like, your heart rate didn't just come out of the blue like this. It wasn't all of a sudden high or too low. Like, where did this come from? And just doing a surgery or taking a pill, like, isn't actually going to fix the root cause of what the problem was. So that's part of our stories, is it takes a very long time sometimes, and sometimes unnecessary measures to actually address what's happening. And that's something that we're not okay with allowing to happen anymore, because it's just not necessary for people. And then, like she said, it brings us to this mental state where we question everything. Do we actually feel this way? Are we actually sick? And that's more what's concerning to me. You should never doubt yourself whether you don't feel well or not. You live in your body every single day. You endure all of this. You know more than anyone else does. And so our job is to really empower you with all of the knowledge that we can, so that you can make the best informed decision, because there are other options out there. And I think we have 6 things, right? Yeah. Yep. So we have 6 things that we wish somebody would have told us. And the first one I'm going to go over, and that's mindset. The mindset that when you get diagnosed with Hashimoto's is to understand that this is an autoimmune condition and it's lifelong. When I say lifelong, that doesn't mean, okay, so there's nothing you can do and we're going to stay on pills for the rest of our life. That's not what that means, okay? When we talk about being diagnosed with a lifelong condition, it just means now you're aware of that, and what needs to happen is we need to kind of work backwards a little bit, and we need to understand what triggered it in the first place, because everyone has their own unique triggers, and we need to heal our gut. Those are 2 of the big, most important things, because you can't change your genes, right? But you can change your lifestyle, and that's what ends up pulling the trigger and how things get activated. And so when we think about it, we have to think about it in this way. Even if we get to remission, like myself and like Vika, we have to work hard every day to stay in remission. It's not just, hey, we're going to do this for 6 months and then you're good for the rest of your life, pal. Like, we put you in an opportune position to then take care of your autoimmune disease. But we want to get you to a position of feeling better and back to your normal self, instead of like this crappy human being like we felt, because that's not fun and it sucks. And then it really affects the mindset, and you get to be more negative, and no one can help me, nothing can help me, this sucks, I have to live with this, if I don't take this pill every day, like, my life is draining. Like, it's not that way. And you don't have to take medication. Not everyone does. It can be a very good tool right away. I chose not to, just because I had been run through the mill with doctors and specialists throwing medication my way, and it actually made me end up in the ER. So I had my own beliefs about that and restrictions on that. So I personally did not have to do it. But the mindset is you have options, and you have to stay positive, and you have to work at it every single day. It's not something that we just, like I said, throw to the wind and say, well, there's nothing we can do, so I might as well keep my lifestyle going the way that it is. Because what's going to happen is you're going to end up feeling terrible every single day moving forward. And then your mindset is going to start being more and more negative about your own health, about everything else. Like, it just is a bubble that starts growing and growing bigger until everything is negative in your life. And sometimes when we do get a big diagnosis like this, we don't know what to do. We don't know where help is. We don't know where to go. And that's also discouraging in our mindset. And again, this is why Vika and I put ourselves out there for people so that we can help reassure you that there are proper next steps. There is stuff that you can be doing every single day to be in control of your health. It does not control you. You are in control of it. And you just have to be given and understand the tools that you need to control it, which is kind of what we do. So the first one is mindset. Mindset, mindset, mindset. It is lifelong, but you can control it. It does not control you. The second one, Vika, what do we got?
So I'm going to have one more comment to the mindset piece. I also want to mention when going on your journey, just understanding that you might have to be a little bit more strict in the beginning when you're trying to like get over the hump of like what triggered your problems. For me, gut health was a part of it, so I had to be very strict with my diet in the beginning. I'm really not as strict anymore. Like, I feel a lot better. There are certain things that are like absolute non-negotiable for me, and some things that I'm a little bit more lax compared to how I was in the beginning because I feel better. So there's also that other portion of reevaluating as you go what you're now based on where your health is, and your health might, go back and forth, and you're like, there's also not an expectation to have perfect health at all time in your life.
Correct.
Because that's not realistic. You might have kids that, sleep deprivation might take you back a couple steps, work might be stressful, you might head at strategy, but that I have had in my life, like in the last couple of years, doesn't compare to how bad of flares I got 10 years ago. Like, it's night and day. So you will feel better, and you will be able to still be a little bit more lax compared to how you are now, but you do have to monitor things. And so I was going to go a little bit into medication. Jasmine said she didn't do medication. I started with not doing medication until I was trying to get pregnant. When I was trying to get pregnant, it wasn't happening as fast as I wanted. So I was like, oh, maybe I should try medication. I will mention, looking back now, I don't think my TSH was as big of an issue as my antibodies. They were at 1,500, which are out of control. That can affect your kids. I highly, highly, highly encourage that if you have very high antibodies, please start working on your body before trying to have kids. If I could have done that in retrospect, I would have, but I didn't know as much as I do now. So another topic, another conversation for another day, but I did really want to mention that. So
Yes.
the about being on medications, it can make your numbers look good on labs. It might get rid of some of your thyroid symptoms. Likely won't get rid of everything, but it might make you feel better, especially if your thyroid numbers are really, really high and out of control, or it depends what numbers you're looking at, but it can make you feel better temporarily also as we work towards figuring out what's causing the autoimmunity portion if you do have Hashimoto's. And if your Hashimoto's does have enough damage, some people do need to do it longer term, but most people can use it either temporarily or, might not have to use it at all. And then the cons of it is it doesn't help so much with autoimmunity because you're not really targeting your immune system with these medications. They're really just targeting your thyroid function. So it might not help with all of your symptoms. It also can cause tolerance. So the longer you're on them, the more you have to up the dose. That happened with me for sure. And every time, like, your symptoms may come back, and that's why you have to up the dose, but your body's just getting tolerant to the drug. That's why it's just not effective anymore. So especially if you're not looking at the root causes, that's probably what's going to happen. So you become more dependent on the drug, and it can cause other symptoms if it's leaning on, like, if it's getting if the dose is too high. But sometimes with people with Hashimoto's, they can even bounce around between, like, one day it's a little bit higher, one day it's a little bit lower. How you eat, what your stress levels is, it can affect that. So I even noticed for myself, some days I'm like, ooh, my dose is way too high. I'm getting like anxiety. I'm starting to get a little bit hot. And then if you're not on it, it usually doesn't cause you those like extreme symptoms. For me, when I'm weaning off now because I am on medication, and it does feel so much better getting off of it because I did notice a little bit more fluctuation on the higher doses especially. So some alternatives I did want to mention that I did use before going on medications was there's thyroid boosting supplements, and you can look at different vitamins and minerals that target thyroid function, those can be really, really great. They
Yeah.
worked for me well. The only reason why I decided to not use them anymore was because I wanted to get pregnant. And when you're pregnant, you really have to be careful about what supplements you use. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, let's just do something that, you know, the doctors know how to monitor, know how to use. And then, you know, now I'm not pregnant anymore and not breastfeeding. So I'm trying to, you know, get off of it maybe before my next baby. Who knows? But you know, never know what's going to be in the future. So that's what I want to mention about medication.
Yeah, I think that's super important to note. And I'm glad you said that too, is with medication. And my question actually, Vika, that I wanted to touch on was, did you have to bring up every time to be, or did you ask to be weaned down, or did they bring that up to you?
I decided to. So in my training, I did learn how to wean, but I'm going to my doctor and getting my labs every 2 months to see where I'm at. So I use different, you know, supplements. You can also do like a thyroid granular, which is still going to be a Band-Aid. So you really don't want to do that. But it was my decision. They would never really suggest it unless things are naturally going down immediately. But I just started noticing my symptoms were getting like the hyperactive,
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm ready to start weaning down. No doctor has actually mentioned it to me before. They're like, this is lifelong for you.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I want to kind of tail off the last of the medication conversation is I've seen way too many people be put on a lifelong thyroid medication and then it never gets checked again and the dosage never gets checked either. And the thing with thyroid medication, you guys, is they're like Goldilocks meds. You have to have the right dose in order to feel better. Otherwise, you're going to end up feeling the hyper or the hypothyroidism symptoms. But what a lot of people don't tell you is they just tell you it's a lifelong med, and no one says that you need to monitor when you need to come back. And usually it's like in a short amount of weeks until you get up to the right dose, and when you start feeling better, like you can be weaned off of it. And most people expect their providers to tell them that, which is, I would expect the same thing, but the problem is most of them don't. So this is another reason where you kind of have to advocate for yourself and you have to figure out how your body feels on the medication if something is going wrong, if it's not feeling better. Like, you have to keep having these medication conversations as long as you're on the thyroid medication. So don't just think, they prescribe this, I'm good to go now for the rest of my life, I just take this same pill. Like, no, you have to redo your testing, you have to, change your dosage. And if you do change your lifestyle as well, that can also be, a prerequisite for people to come off of their medication too. When you make changes that improve your thyroid function, you don't need as much of that medication anymore. And I don't think that's a lot of things that people understand about the medication aspect of it. We're not really here to tell you not to do it or to do it. It's definitely a self-choice. And like we said, sometimes being on it can make you feel really good right away and help alleviate those symptoms. But as long as you also follow that up with finding the root cause. So if you
Absolutely.
don't do that, you're always going to feel like crap, and it's not going to be fun for anybody.
And did want to
Um,
I did want to mention a comment. The reason also why you want to find the root cause is that whatever the root cause is, it might not just cause Hashimoto's. That
mhm.
might be the cause. Then it might cause another autoimmune disease. Like lupus is very common to follow Hashimoto's diagnosis. It could
Yeah.
lead to so many things. So you don't want to have autoimmunity going on in the background. You really do want to get at the root causes to feel better long term and prevent a lot of other issues from coming here. And one other comment I forgot to mention about medications is some of them have lactose in them. So that's
Mm-hmm.
another thing that if some people I know in the Hashimoto's community don't do well with lactose. I did not for a very long time. I can handle it now.
Yeah.
But that's the thing to mention to your doctors. Most doctors don't know about it. So you have to tell them, like, levothyroxine has lactose. Levoxyl, for example, doesn't. Tyrosine doesn't if you're going to go with the synthetic drugs. You have to talk to them about them and say, hey, I have a problem with lactose, if that's you, and can you make sure that my medication doesn't have it on there? Because most doctors
So
don't know.
important.
With any medication conversation, you have to be your own advocate. Because even I got pregnant, every single time I was like, hey, I have Hashimoto's, I have thyroid, I am prone to thyroid problems. Can you please check my labs every couple months while I'm pregnant to make sure we're on track? Because that first month of pregnancy is when it affects the baby the most. So you do want to be monitoring it pre-conception and during, ideally.
100%. Yeah, completely agree. And I'm glad that you brought up the dairy in it because, like you said, a lot of people don't know that. And Levo is one of the most prescribed thyroid medications. So if you have, an intolerance or a food sensitivity to dairy, probably it's not going to be the best medication for you because you're going to reap those symptoms and not feel very good.
Yep.
But that leads us to our third, which is nutrition. And so when we first got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, no one talked to us about diet and what we should stay away from, what we should have. And obviously, this is going to be a very controversial topic, but I'm here to reassure you. And again, we're here to always give you your options and let you decide. But one of the biggest things that is always talked about is gluten. And the reason it's talked about is because it's the most researched protein that causes food sensitivities or even autoimmune diseases like celiac. About 76% of Hashimoto's struggle with gluten. So that's the reason that we talk about it all the time. Now that's 76%, that's not 100%. So we can't sit here and say that all of you should stop taking gluten just because you have Hashimoto's. What we want to empower you with is it might make you feel better if you find out if you particularly have a sensitivity to it. And now most symptoms that you have food sensitivities to will be gut symptoms. But the second place where people have sensitivities, symptoms, is the brain. So when we talk about lacking concentration or having brain fog or being tired all the time, we have to think about that too. And so besides gluten and dairy and sugar being at the very top percentages for Hashimoto's people for food sensitivities, you have to figure it out for yourself if you react to it. And so a very easy way to do that is an elimination diet, the way that Vika and I did. Because if you think about all the things that you buy, if you're not buying whole foods every day, you're eating a lot of different things in one package. So like if I eat an apple, I know it's just an apple. So if I have a reaction to that, I know it's the apple. But then I also know what the reaction is. And that's the most important thing. You need to understand how your body specifically is reacting to this particular food. For me, when I ingest gluten, my face lights up like the 4th of July. It is red, it is hot, my rosacea rash flares like crazy. And that's just something I know about gluten. So I make the personal choice that I will not have gluten, and that's my decision. If I do have gluten, or if I go into somebody else's kitchen, so whether that's a restaurant or I'm at a family's house or a friend's house and there's cross-contamination, obviously the reaction will still happen even though I tried to avoid it, but I know what it's from. And so I don't freak out about it. I know what's going on. I know what's happening to my body. And the elimination diet really helps you to eliminate not only like the biggest allergens, but the biggest things that also people have trouble with, whether that's digestion or just tolerating if it's based on enzymes. And you take those out. I took them out for about 2 months. I think they recommend 30 to 90 days. So again, totally up to you about how long you want to take them out. And then you resensitize your body to those. And then by the time you reintroduce them very slowly so that you understand how your body's reacting to them. So like we'll introduce, like grains 1 week. And the thing with sensitivities is they're not anaphylactic reactions. So when people, and I've had clients say, hey, I feel this way, but the last time I ate dairy was 3 days ago. And I'm like, that's okay, because delayed reactions can be 72 hours later. So that's something you have to understand as well. It's not going to be immediate if it's not anaphylactic, but it can still show up 3 days later for you. And so that is part of what the whole elimination diet is about. You take out all of these and you slowly add them back in, but paying attention to how your body feels as well and what amount that you ate. Because sometimes it's about threshold too. Maybe I can only tolerate a fourth cup of green beans and I can't tolerate a whole cup. I can still have green beans, but I understand the limit I can have. And so everyone is going to be different here, and it's super important. So that's kind of why we talk about gluten a lot. Obviously, dairy will also be up there for people too, but everybody is different. And I don't want people to be scared about food. What we want you to do is to understand how your body specifically reacts to different foods. And for me, I did this a couple of times. I think I do it like once a year. But when I first got diagnosed and I did it right away, I didn't care. Like, I didn't care how hard it was, which it's not easy to cut out all those things. I did not care how hard it was. I wanted the symptoms to go away that bad. So I threw everything in the next day. I dropped everything and I started an elimination diet. Here's what I learned. You need to be prepared to do an elimination diet because it is tough, and the easiest way to do that is to meal prep. Otherwise, you're going to end up in the kitchen on the floor, probably crying because you're hangry and you don't know what to eat because you can't eat anything because you just eliminated everything. And I don't want you to be in that same position I was. So definitely understand what it is, meal prep, plan for it, and then take it on. For me, I did this before and then everything improved, and I do it once a year because I would like to at some point see if I can add gluten back in. That option is never taken off the table, and I want you to understand that. Just because you can't have something doesn't mean you can't have it forever. And sometimes it's just a small amount of time, and then you retry. And so every year I retry a small amount of gluten to see if my reactions are still the same or if they're better. So that's an option for you as well. Do you have anything else you want to add to nutrition, Vika?
I can tell you guys about what my food sensitivities look like because I had dairy and gluten were my biggest ones, but they were so different. With gluten, in the very beginning, I've tried bringing it in, but I'm just like, I can live without it. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
In the very, very beginning, if I had gluten, it was like this, I need to take a nap. Like, I'm so tired. Nap. I'm going to have joint pain the next day. I'm going to be living in baths and like on the bottom of my shower, kneeled over like this from joint pain. It was so incredibly bad, but it was very, very different from dairy. Oh, and I'd also get canker sores, stomach ulcers, and what it felt like was intestinal ulcers, but I never got a diagnosis for like ulcerative colitis or anything like that. But it was a whole shebang. And then dairy was very different. I would start sneezing. I would have a lot of phlegm, like a lot of, and I could talk, a different day about how I got rid of that because I recently have gotten rid of that. Just for a long time helped, but I did have some targeted herbs that really got it out of control. But it was a lot of phlegm, a lot of like seasonal allergies, and that's actually typically an IgA reaction. Not IgG or IgE, because IgA does a lot of that like mucus building. So that was, but in the beginning I was probably sensitive to a lot of things because I did have really bad gut health like 10 years ago. So like I eliminated, kind of like you, I was very desperate. I was like, I can't be crying myself to sleep every night and feel pain, and it was just horrible. So to me, going on an elimination diet was everything. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but I found this book called The Crazy Sexy Diet by Chris Carr. It was a woman who had cancer, and she changed her lifestyle and got her cancer. I don't think she got rid of her cancer. It was slow growing, but she was able to live like a long, happy life, and she's still alive. So she taught a lot about like food and nutrition and a lot of holistic stuff, and at the end she had an elimination diet. So that was my little jump start, and I was desperate and it helped, but I didn't know why until I realized the gluten and the dairy were the two biggest pieces of it.
Yeah, and like I said, the reason I jumped in for it is because I wanted to do anything I could to help myself, right? And that's kind of where we're at when we go to the doctor and we feel so unempowered. Like we want to try and do or find anything that we can do to get it going, And so the elimination diet, excuse my window blinds, the elimination diet is what really empowered me and opened my eyes up to a lot of label reading and things to pay attention to at the same time. And what the healthiest, cleanest options were if I wanted something packaged. And so it can be a very useful tool if it resonates with you, if it's something you want to do. At the same time, the last comment I will make on it is it was easier for me to heal my gut when I eliminated the high reactors. So the gluten was not helping any of my symptoms, it was making them worse. And yes, I wanted to heal and seal my gut lining up so that those proteins would stop leaking into my bloodstream and causing such an immune reaction. But it helped significantly to take it away during that healing time so that I didn't feel as crappy. And so that's kind of why I took it out as well at the same time. And then, like I said, I always try every year to see if I can reintroduce it, at what level do I still react, do I still feel good. So there's always options around everything, and just always know it's completely up to you what you want to do.
I agree. For me, was that getting rid of high reactors is what helped a lot of my gut problems.
Yeah.
It also just makes you realize that you have a lot of power in using food as a medical tool. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean bad food will make you unhealthy, but it can be used as a medical tool to get a lot of your symptoms under control. And then
100%.
you have to do more healing and more root cause digging, but it's a great place to start. And it's cheap. So.
Yeah, well, mm-hmm. And then what is our fourth one?
Non-toxic living. So I'm going to start with what I think was the worst place to start if you have thyroid problems, and that's spraying a bunch of perfume onto your, your neck. If you have any place where you have an organ that's not working like at its peak, probably adding a bunch of toxins to it is not the way to go. The thyroid is very, very fickle and sensitive to toxins, and that's toxins in your water, it's fragrances. Like my big thing is wherever you can minimize toxins, you should try.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to start doing it all at once. Start with what you think is reasonable to you. Like, do you think you could start with just switching out your laundry detergent for something cleaner? Do you think you would rather start with your cleaning products? Do you think when your mascara runs out, can you get a non-toxic alternative? There's so many ways to go about it, but at the minimum, like I would say water is a big one, and toothpaste is a big one, and fragrances.
Yeah.
Be careful. I was the girl who loved spraying on perfumes. Like that was my I have my old like super toxic ones. I'm not letting go of them, but I never use them. They just sit in my counter waiting for me, I guess. But I have switched over to some like non-cleaner perfume brands that are, more based on essential oils. There are more luxury brands coming out now that are a little bit cleaner. I still don't use them on a daily basis like I used to when I was younger, but I do on special occasions because I like it. But some people are really sensitive to the smell, so they might not even want anything to do with it anyway. But I would start thinking about where you can reduce that toxic load, because if you do have if you already have autoimmune disease, that means you are likely sensitive. You do have a genetic predisposition to having higher reactions to environmental toxins. So it's something that you want to be aware of. And there are other environmental toxins that are not man-made, like mold and like other things. So those are other things that you might want to consider, be pretty good at cleaning, maintaining your house and things like that. And that will also serve you in your autoimmune condition.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's super important to mention, because sometimes when we recommend or we tell people things, they kind of go like all in, like an all or nothing mindset. Either it stays all toxic or it all goes away. And that can be super, super overwhelming for somebody, especially when it's a lifelong change you're making. And so I always kind of err on the side of lightness, where it's like, well, what's one thing that you can change as soon as the bottle gets empty? Is that your dish soap? Is that your kitchen cleaning products? Is that your laundry? Is that your makeup? Is that your personal care products? Like, non-toxic things are expensive. And so once you start figuring that out, like, it becomes almost like impossible for some people to just change everything in the matter of a day. And so I don't want people to get overwhelmed with having to change everything out for a non-toxic lifestyle. Start simple, start easy, start the next thing, then do the next thing, and take it a step at a time, and will be a lot easier to digest.
And it's always like what I like to think about it is always having a growth mindset. You can start right here and still have like incremental improvement. You don't have to like massively change your life in like a day or a month or a year. You can do it within like a long time. And sometimes there are healthier options that are cheaper, but that means you have to learn more. You have to do more. You might have to make things from scratch. And that's also an option. So the way I see it is like if you have money to invest, you can pay somebody else to do it. If you have no money, then using your time and putting your efforts into the right things will still help you get to a better place. But start slow where you can.
100%. I agree. And then our fifth thing is triggers. And so I think we're going to end up going, back and forth on this one too. Because we also, the biggest thing that I want you to know when it comes to Hashimoto's is we all have different triggers. So my triggers are different than Vika's triggers. We may have one or two in common, but they're all different for everybody. So we can't just say, hey, do this, or take this out of your life because it's triggering you. It can be it's very, very much individualized. So just keep that in mind.
My phone is dying, so I'm going to get my charger, but you keep.
No problem. And so some of the common triggers for Hashimoto's can be those food sensitivities too, which end up happening because of leaky gut. And so everyone with an autoimmune condition has leaky gut, and that needs to be healed and sealed first. And that helps, like we said, with the food sensitivities, then you're not having as strong of a reaction to whatever your food sensitivities were. A lot of illnesses, not illnesses, pathogens can lead to triggers as well, like H. pylori or Candida overgrowth or Epstein-Barr. All of those things can be triggers. I know for me personally, I had H. pylori and Epstein-Barr and a lot of it, and I never imagined, I could never recall, I should say, a moment in my life where I had mono, so that was very surprising to me. But my partner has, which, as you know, it is a kissing disease, so it's there in dormant all of the time, and it's when we get these perfect storms of leaky gut and genetic predisposition and then the right triggers is when it starts to activate. For me, I also had a head concussion on top of that, which also leads to leaky gut, so that leaky gut was present during that time when it decided to become known to me, essentially. Besides pathogens and food triggers and leaky gut, what for you was a trigger?
So Candida was definitely a big trigger, but one thing that I never actually, sorry, I just want to make sure my phone doesn't die, and it's a little bit funny. There we go. So one thing that I never got to test, but looking back now that I have the knowledge that I have, a lot of my health problems started early, like 19, but there was 1 year where like I started to get improvement in my gut health, and then I moved into a really bad old building in a college campus, and I mean my health went to another level of bad, and I got Hashimoto's a little bit later after that. So I have a huge feeling that mold was a big trigger or a contributing factor, because I don't think it was the root of everything. I think I already had something compromised with, other things going on, and it kind of just made it worse. Right. Which I don't know if you guys know a lot about mold, but usually people who are susceptible to mold already have other infections, and that's what makes them more sensitive to mold in the house. So I can tell a little bit about what that flare looked like. I was having insomnia, waking up at like 3 a.m. to go for runs because I couldn't sleep, panic attacks, like definitely felt like I was going back and forth between depression and like mania. And as soon as I would feel a little bit of mania, it would drop down to depression. It was awful. It was really, really bad. I've had like brain pain in my brain, and like I couldn't think anymore. Anytime I would try to read like a bullet point list, I thought I was gonna throw up, and I was in college, so I was like, something's really wrong. And my parents were like, no, you just gotta or you gotta go to the library more often. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, my health is not okay. I gained 40 pounds in 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And then once I moved out of that house, like immediately I started to feel a little bit better. But it took about like 5 years before I stopped having like any bouts of like insomnia or panic attacks. Like they immediately like decreased, but it still took a long time. Like now looking back, I'm like, definitely I think if I did a lot more detox support, it could have been a lot faster. But lucky for me, it didn't turn into like really, really bad SIRS, because some people who do get exposure to mold, even once they leave it, they can have chronic health issues that are like at that same level that I had it that year. They can like keep on for that long. And
Wow.
mine got better. But I do think it had a big contributing factor to like um my autoimmunity levels, my TPO antibodies, because after that they were just out of control.
Yeah, 100%. There are other, like besides toxins, there are heavy metals that can also
Mm-hmm.
kind of accelerate that as well. If anyone ever got mercury fillings when they, if you're old enough to have a mercury feeling, I guess I should say, that also it can be a contributing metal. I believe cadmium as well is a big one, and that's one that's really found in smoking, or if you were ever exposed to like secondhand smoke as well. And then, like I said, there's a million triggers, and sometimes it's not just one either. But everyone is different. Everyone has different triggers, whether you're exposed to mold, or you're exposed to EBV, or you're exposed to Hep C, or you have yeast overgrowth, or you have H. pylori, or any and all of these infections can significantly contribute. There was something I was going to say and I forgot. I call that thyroid brain when I forget.
I can mention the other thing that you have to think about is lifestyle triggers. Because, like, for me, one thing that I think triggered my candida overgrowth, if you think about it, the candida could be called a root cause, but I don't think it is most of the time. Something else is causing that. For me, the combination of, being on birth control medication, right after that, I started having more like typical candida symptoms. I was a young kid partying, drinking too much, probably not eating the right things. All those things can contribute to that. If you live a very high stress lifestyle, that can sometimes cause a flare, especially like move you into that adrenal burnout, which once you get there, then that affects your thyroid. That causes a cascade of things. So high performers looking at you, type A's, that's usually can be a trigger for you. But there's so many other things that you could be contributing to what you're doing. So what you're doing, how that affects all these root causes are important, because sometimes we can get everything under control based on labs, but if you're still doing the same actions that got you there, then you can get everything back, and you don't want that either.
100%. I would agree with that. And you have to think about it this way too. Usually people with thyroid problems have a harder time detoxing things. And so when you have a lot of toxins around you, all you're doing is building that up, and then they never get eliminated properly. So that's why toxins is huge, and your liver health is huge in that aspect. And then, like Vika said, the same thing with adrenal health is are you stressed out, and what are you doing every day contributing to that stress and not peeling it backwards? And the same goes with food too. Food, you have to think about, this will be a whole different conversation if we go into this, but you have to think about the farming as well, and all the herbicides and pesticides that you're ingesting, and all of those matter, and your whole system functions together. So it's really a system process, but it's so easy to just blame it on one thing, and it usually really isn't the case.
Absolutely. I think that's the hardest part, when somebody, that I know will say, oh, I have Hashimoto's, like, what can fix it? And I'm like, that's a very
Yeah, that's a long answer.
like, I can give you a couple band-aids, I can give you, like some dietary solutions, but it really comes down to, like you've said multiple times on this call, that it's very personal. You have to figure out what the triggers are, but you also have to understand that if you have something like Hashimoto's, you have a genetic predisposition to being more sensitive to some of these things going around. Because somebody could have all the same stuff as you going on, and they're just going to have something else. They're just not going to have Hashimoto's. They might still have an illness. They might feel okay.
Yeah.
but it might not be Hashimoto's because their genetic predispositions are a little bit different.
Correct. And then birth control definitely is a trigger, as well as periodontal disease, if you did not know, which we'll be talking dental stuff tomorrow. But there are a lot of things, basically, is our point, and everyone is going to be different. So everything has to be personalized. You can't just go up to your friend with Hashimoto's and be like, you have Hashimoto's, what did you do? Let's do the same thing. Like,
Right.
you're not going to have the same problems.
Exactly.
You can, what I like to phrase with people is when you're starting your journey, when you're trying to put it in remission, you can't do the same thing as somebody else with Hashimoto's. But what you can do afterwards is, support each other's lifestyle habits moving forward. Hey, we both have this autoimmune disease. I have to stay away from gluten, I have to stay away from dairy, and then like make your lunch dates at places that are gluten-free and dairy-free. Like, you can still do things with other people, but your journey to get to remission is going to be completely different than somebody else's.
Absolutely.
And then
sorry,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that's where it goes back to like being strict in the beginning and reevaluating as you go and coming up with like a healing plan and then a long-term game plan for, health maintenance.
Yeah. Which kind of leads us into our sixth and final point of what we wish somebody would have told us when we were diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And that would be functional medicine, right?
Yeah.
With functional medicine, it just gets you there faster. And that's kind of our like big message, is it gets you there faster because we've both spent years and Vika spent years longer than I myself, but people spend a lot of years trying to figure out what it is they even have, and they're suffering for all of those years. They're losing hope over all those years. Unnecessary things are happening in the medical field or to their health secondary to that. Because the root causes aren't being addressed. And it's just like a circle of misery trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And it's not comfortable. It doesn't feel good in any way, shape, or form, body or mind, going through a process like that. And Vika and I would know because we've had to go through it ourselves, and we still have to go through it every day, when we try and keep our, work hard to keep our Hashimoto's in remission, or anytime we have a doctor's visit and have to go check labs, like, we really have to stay strong and advocate every day. Like, the more you know is power for you and advocating for your health. But Vika, how else can functional medicine get us there faster?
Well, I wanted to say, like the way I started was diet, and I think diet can be so great and such a like helpful tool. But what you can do with diet alone will take you years, like absolutely years. And you can change that with functional medicine to months, depending on your case. If your case is really complicated, it could still be a year, let's say max 2, but it's not going to be a decade anymore.
Yeah.
But just with food alone and do nothing else, it's going to take you a long time, but it's still going to give you progress. So it's not like it's a bad, that's all you have, finances for. That's a great place to start, but keep learning as you go. Never stop learning. And if you want to get there faster, then find someone who has already done it, and they'll help you get to a much faster pace, to a better place much faster.
Yes, I completely agree. I think it's super important to understand that when you get diagnosed with Hashimoto's, we need to work backwards because it's been activated, which means we need to figure out what activated it, so identify our triggers. And we need to heal our gut and focus on that first to understand why our immune system is all of a sudden overreacting and igniting this autoimmune disease. We need to start there. And sometimes when you start at the beginning, I would say most of the time when you start at the beginning, it's restrictive and it can be challenging. And that usually is what puts people off, is because it's so restricting. But I want you to understand that it's just the beginning, because we have to do all of the work to get you to remission first. And then, like Vika and I said, then it becomes easier every day as you already know what to do. You make your choices of what you stay away from, what doesn't feel good to you. You make the choices to continue eating whole foods or to bring, stress relief to your life, or, exercise, or, whatever that looks like, whatever your choices end up being after, but you have to start at the hard part first.
Right.
And that's what ends up being something where people are like, I don't want to do that. I would rather just take a pill for the rest of my life. And what can be a little, off-putting is when you take a pill right away, it can help you symptomatically as a tool right away. But then eventually you end up feeling like crap again because we're not addressing your root causes. We're not addressing your triggers. And then you just play this cycle game over and over again. So sometimes medication is an easier option for people, and you would rather just say, okay, I have this, let me take this pill and let's not worry about it anymore. But unfortunately, when you have an autoimmune disease, especially when it's been activated, you need to put in the work up front to get it to remission, and then it'll be much, much easier every single day as you're more aware and you have the tools and resources that you need to keep it that way, to feel better every single day, because now you know what the consequences are specifically to you and what those symptoms mean when they come up in your body. You know what they are. So it is hard up front, but it's so rewarding later to understand more about your body and what works for it and be empowered when it comes to even confronting doctors about it, because they can't negate what you're saying about yourself because you know you more than anyone else.
And unfortunately, I mean, I've been to all of them, the endocrinologists, everything, like, they don't help you as much as you think they will, you know? So the alternative to me isn't even that it's harder in the beginning. It's either you feel like crap all the time, even with medications. Medications are not going to get rid of every single Hashimoto's related symptom. And you might get new autoimmune diseases later down the road. It really is, do you let yourself like kind of be in that Band-Aid mode and then keep deteriorating? Or do you want to improve your body and have a happier, healthier life? To me, that's the only two options I see. And you can do it slow by trying to learn it all on your own, or you can do it faster with support.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. 100%. I agree. Like I said, to empower you to make the best decision for you, and that is providing you with with the information that we have, and that includes our stories and where we started, because it, like we said, it takes a lot of work to go through the traditional side of things and end up with no answers and still feeling like crap. And for us, that's just unacceptable. There's no reason for that. We don't want to do that. So we're here to tell you that you, like she said, there kind of is two choices. You figure it out and you go, your own route. If you want to go through traditional medicine and have that whole experience and see what you get, I mean, you are more than welcome to. You have that option. That's always an option for you. But what we want to also bring to the table for you is what functional medicine can do for you and how it can get you there a lot faster to feeling better, but also providing you with the tools and the resources so that you can carry this out every single day for the rest of your life and feel better and not let this control you, but you get to stay in control of it. So it really just is a mindset piece of where you're at, how you're feeling with your Hashimoto's. Is it worth it to you to take care of this and do it in a way that's faster and will, when we address the root causes, gets you to a place that lasts longer? Or do you want to take, the longer road, is how we would say it. Yeah, both are choices. They're all choices. All we make all day are choices, and you just need to be informed of what the options are. I am very strong for people to advocate for themselves, but that requires you to actually know all the information first.
100%. 100%. That's my biggest, I think, struggle with our current medical system, is that people aren't getting all of the options, and that's why it's just not a fair decision.
Yeah. 100%.
The more that people know about this, so let's just say one more person learns about functional medicine, about holistic healing, you're going to be now an advocate for everyone around you. Anyone who comes up with a chronic illness, you could be like, oh, you might not have to suffer. There might be another way for you to do it. And you spread the word. You give people options, because that's what serves at the end of the day, is options.
Yep.
More resources to feel better.
100%. That's exactly what happened to me. Is I had no idea about functional medicine, and it was through, a chiropractor friend of mine who was willing to, saw my suffering and was willing to share her husband's functional medicine journey with me, like how he went through traditional care and almost ended up with a heart transplant for absolutely no reason. And come to find out he had an autoimmune disease that is now in remission and he's doing just fine. People's stories matter. They have a lot of impact. They have a lot of knowledge of what they've been through and what worked for them, and all they want to do is share that with someone else, and that's kind of where we're at. We have been through it. We have felt the suffering. We don't want people to have to do that. I don't think that we should have to work that hard to find an answer for something in order to feel better. And so we're here to, share our stories and empower other people to be like, hey, I don't know much about functional medicine, but I think there's an option for you. And spark that, ignite that in somebody so that they can make an option of what's best for them.
100%.
Love it. Well, we went through the 6. This was a very long live. I apologize, and thank you to anyone who has stayed and watched the whole thing. We know we ran over, but we also, at the end, love to give free stuff away. So I have a Thyroid Essentials freebie that I will post in my story if you want to grab it. I do also have an elimination diet freebie, so if you would rather have that one, just DM me and I can send that to you. And then Vika, what you got?
Yeah, I have a list of things you can do before working with a practitioner. It gives you a little bit of a jump start, so you can DM me if you're interested in that. I can put in my story as well. And then the other freebie I do have is I think it's called like 5 ways to simplify and de-stress your life. It's just different things to kind of calm that system down and give you tools to make your life a little bit easier, because I think most of us with chronic illness need that.
We all have stress issues. It's much needed. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I know that all of this information will touch someone. I know how important our work is. So thank you for taking the time and thank you for being here. And we will see you guys next time.
Yep. Thanks.
Bye.
Jasmine.